Today's meeting involves something that for me is extremely personal. And I hope that I'll be able to share some of what it means for me and perhaps what it might mean for you. The story that I chose to represent this experience is a story where Savta tried to testify against a prison guard who stretched the definition of evil. Savta goes on to describe the evil. That was not the point of the story. What the point of the story that I see is her inability to get that message across. She studied English. She lectured very extensively. She was speaking largely to the choir. The people who listened to her were people who wanted to know the story of the Holocaust and wanted to know how they survived and their courage, and wanted to know what they endured, and had tremendous respect for Savta, and especially, of course, Omi and Tibadul L'chaim at Marlit's ability to endure beyond all and any definition of challenge. But there was an undercurrent in the story, which was, what would her message be to those who did not want to know, and who wanted to deny, and who wanted to belittle, and who wanted to reject the message? And this consumed her. I think that it's important to put it into a hashkafic context. Chazal tell us, it's a Gemara in Psachim, Daf Kuf Yud Ches. Chazal tell us, Hodu Lashem Ki Tov. There's a praise to Hashem that He allows a gzeira, He allows a decree that has been made against a person or against a group, against Klal Yisrael. He allows it to be paid down in other ways than their physical destruction. We have a common expression that Hashem saved Klal Yisrael because He expended His decree on Eitzim Va'avanim, on the stones and the bricks, the mortar, the beams of the Beis HaMikdash. And in so doing, He allowed for the physical existence and the continuation of Klal Yisrael. There's an expression in that Gemara that says that that Hashem, when there's a decree, allows the poor person to lose his sheep, and that enables the poor person to carry on and live. We had talked about the fact that there was a Gezeras Chaim. There was a decree that Savta would live. There was a decree that we would come into the world, that there would be a continuation of generations. There was a decree of life. But the decree of life does not mean that there was not a decree of death. The decree of life is a decision on the part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu that this person or these people would continue and would have children, and there would be a continuation of Klal Yisrael through them. And that was a Gzeras Chaim. But there was a Gzera of Misa. There was a decree of death that was decreed on the generation. And that needed to be paid down. But just like the poor person has a beloved sheep that becomes the vehicle and the tool by which the debt could be paid down, for Savta, it was the inability to turn the tide against the deniers. It was so precious to her. It was so close to her heart. But there was a decree that said that she would have to endure people who said that it didn't happen, that you're exaggerating, that you're making it up, that this didn't actually happen. And with all of the clarity that she had and her ability to articulate what she had experienced, she nevertheless needed to endure another form of death. And that form of death was having to live to see and to hear those who belittled her experience, denied her experience, cast aspersions on its authenticity, a world of Holocaust denial. I don't know whether a physical death or that exposure is worse. I'm not in the business of assessing that. But from the heavenly decree, although we were meant to live, we would be forced to have to be exposed, and she had to be exposed to an inability to get the message across to those who increasingly, and it started almost immediately. I mean, the Arab world started it literally right away, that immediately there was a stream in the world that denied the validity of her experience. And that took a tremendous toll. We might even say that as a toll, it was as unbearable and as overwhelming as the toll of the actual experiences in the camps. Again, I'm not one to assess, to measure one against the next. But there is such a concept in Chazal of Hashem allowing a person to pay down the debt of physical destruction through the pain, the embarrassment, the overwhelming sense of being of just blowing into the wind when it came to the increasing stream of those who denied it. And I think that it is part of the symbol of this Gezerah that she did not publish her book. It is not simply, well, she didn't get around to it. It was too much. It might have been too hard. There was a part, it seemed as though heaven was preventing it. It wasn't just some excuse or some explanation. Heaven was preventing her from getting the message out in the way that perhaps that she wanted to. And I believe that we have to recognize that we cannot ever consider a historical event as permanent. The historical event is not what is permanent. The moral lesson that we are meant to learn, that's the only thing that endures. When we reflect on an event that took place and we translate that into growth into a relationship with Hashem as both Avinu and Malkeinu. When we internalize, when we pass on the event as a moral lesson, then the lesson and the history endures. That's the difference between events that were just part of history, and Jews were not big historians. Instead, they wrote kinos. Instead, they insisted that there be a moral lesson, that there be tshuva, that there be a plea to Hashem, that there be a relationship based on those events. And they wrote kinos. They didn't write history. Because we are not here to write history. We are here to learn moral lessons. And moral lessons is not waving the banner of never again. It's waving the banner of what will I take from this? How will I internalize this message so that I will come closer to Avinu Malkeinu? And that is why I don't feel the agenda of taking Savta's material and publishing it. That's not the agenda. The agenda is looking at what happened to Savta and saying what is embedded, what lessons are embedded in those experiences that will help me grow in my relationship with Hashem. There are many people who went all the way to the other extreme. They used those same events to distance themselves from Hashem. And we declare unambiguously that these events are useful. They are useful in the sense that we can use them to help enhance our relationship with Hashem as both Avinu, who saved us, and Malkeinu, who absolutely controls every aspect of our reality, and it is to him that we must ultimately defer. And so this is a very personal story where I so remember Savta wanting to testify, but testifying in this, listen to the story, it was such a naivete. She simply assumed that if she told the story, it would be received. So she didn't come to this deposition with a lawyer or with a team of lawyers. She came by herself, expecting to give testimony to describe what happened and that it would be received. But that wasn't what was going to happen. Two fancy lawyers were there, German lawyers, who completely dismissed her story, who even invalidated her ability to tell the story. What could be worse than death? But to have to confront that reality, that it would not be the story that would convict, that Hashem alone is the judge who will convict, that Hashem alone is the one who will exact a price for every single drop of Jewish blood that has been spilled by the non-Jewish world. And we must remember that the process of growing from a historical event is not simply a process of making sure that everybody knows that the event happened. That's a little bit like somebody who hears a great Dvar Torah and feels an urge to tell somebody else. I would remind the person who heard the wonderful Dvar Torah, don't run to tell somebody else. First, internalize its message. Take it home with you. But that could take forever. It might take 25 years, but it will be 25 years well spent. Because if the message moves you, if the message speaks to you, then it's meant for you. Then it's Hashem speaking to you. Take it, use it. No, but I just feel this urge to tell it to others. You're doing a disservice to the message that Hashem is trying to communicate to you. After you're done internalizing the message, however long that takes, there might be room to pass it on to others as a gift. It might help them as well. But that's not what you're meant to do with something that moves you. What you're meant to do with something that moves you is to change, is to grow, is to internalize. And so Savta's story is my mission to try to internalize and learn from the story. And I'm passing that mission on, not in any way dictating the terms of how to learn from that message. But if we don't learn from the message and we simply try to tell the story on to others, we're going to lose the message. Because if a message moves you, and it's hard to imagine that the stories of Savta's experiences would not move us, but you know what? I don't dictate that. But if a story moves you, then you must ask yourself, what is Hashem telling me? How am I meant to grow from this? How am I meant to turn it into an intensification of my relationship with Hashem? And the pain of not being able to get the message out is a poignant pain. It's a pain that I think was Savta's lifeblood. And it was part of a gezerah. But the lesson that we're supposed to take is don't get involved in telling over stories that move you. Repeat stories to yourself that move you until you're able to internalize and capture the message. And sometimes that takes a lot of thought, a lot of introspection. Sometimes it takes years. But don't leave it. Don't abandon it. If something moves you, it's there for you. It's a gift. It's an opportunity. Use it, grow from it, and in so doing, you will have captured what that message was meant to do in this world. You will be ma'aleh the nitzotzot, if you will. You will grab the precious gem of sanctity that is hiding underneath that event, that is hiding under the mud of that event when it's just looked at as an event, and you turned it into something holy because you allowed it to come inside you as enhancing your relationship with Avinu and Malkeinu.